In the previous Corecon training video, we explored the Add Prime Contract Invoice wizard for Cost Plus Prime Contracts using option A, which was adding items to a customer invoice based on the transaction type. In this training video, we're also discussing how to add a Prime Contract Invoice for Cost Plus Prime Contracts using option B. That is where we're going to import actual expenses and time cards with the markup option for resource types. You'll notice that I've already selected a project and a prime contract. The prime contract is set up as a cost plus contract and is marked approved with an approved status date. Before we explore the second method, there's a few reminders. First of all, that expenses and time cards must meet a few criteria to be imported into a cost plus prime invoice. First, they must not be referenced on a prior prime invoice. The expense issue and status date must be equal to or less than the prime invoice issue date. Time cards also must have a time card date equal to or less than the prime invoice's issue date. The transactions must have an approved status. They must also show a billable status. And the expense or time card must have a billable amount greater than 0. Since this method has the ability to add markups by resource type, that's also how the costs and expenses will be added to the prime invoice, also grouped by resource type. To begin, let's go to the prime invoice and go to Actions and Add Manually. Corecon fills in most of the information. We're going to use a different issue date, however. We're going to bill through the 31st of July. We're also going to mark it approved. It does have retainage. Click Save and Next. This time we're using option B, Import Actual Expenses and Time Cards with Markup option for resource type. There are 5 resource types: materials, labor, equipment, subcontract, and other. And then click Next. Only the billable transactions with dates equal to or less than July the 30th are going to show up. They're summarized here by record count and subtotal. You can select to import, and you also have the ability to add a markup based on the cost resource or cost type. Since we set up a default markup for the original contract items, we're going to skip adding that markup here. But it is important to note that you can do this, and if the markup is different based on the cost resource or cost type, this is an excellent way to add that markup. We're adding markup across all items. Then we're going to click Next. And all of the information came in. We are going to include the default markups, which is the same rates for all cost types or cost resources, and click Save and Next. You do have the ability to see the details that have been imported. You also have the ability to make some changes or delete. There's also a place to edit the released retainage, and we're covering that in a separate training video. There's a summary of the invoice. If we go to Reports, Prime Invoice Details, we're going to take a look at 2 different Prime Invoice formats. First, let's take a look at the format for the Prime Invoice Cost Plus with GMP Item Details. We're going to export this to PDF, but it could be printed to your printer. It can also be emailed from the same spot. But to preview it, let's use a PDF file format and click OK. In this case, the type of transaction is referenced, all the details, and there is a summary for retainage if you need it. There's also a summary of the invoice at the top. Another one you might be interested in is the second to the last, which is item summed by transaction reference. This is less detail and subtotaled by the transaction reference. bills, markup, miscellaneous expenses, sub-invoices, and time cards in this case. Again, these can be emailed from the same location. And when you go to the reports menu on the prime contract invoice information page, you can also print out your lien waivers. The important part to remember about this prime invoice wizard using option B is that you can add optional markups by resource type. Again, the resource types are materials, labor, equipment, subcontract, and other. If you'd like to know more information about this method, we encourage you to go to the help articles, down to leads and projects, to contract administration, then to prime contract invoice, then to cost plus prime contracts, and near the bottom there is a help article for each of the 4 methods we're discussing in this series of videos.